this technique is one that we covered in previous classes. Here's my end shot. And you remember on the Neptune sculpture that I had photographed in Rome, I did this kind of contour, black and white, in the background. So I have this shot from the zoo. I want to make a selection of the main subject. So I will take the, oh, let's try it by going up to select subject and see what happens with that. It's working. Did a pretty good job. You notice it has selected the bird very well. There's a little bit of extra here I don't want. So I'll get the quick selection tool on minus, which is up in the upper bar, or if you hold the Alt key, if you have the plus and you're working with plus and you hold the Alt key, it turns it into a minus sign. And so I'll remove that little bit there, I'll remove that little bit there, come down, and I have the plus sign, so I want to pick up the branch. And if you don't want something, you go on the outside of what you have and use the minus, click the Alt key and deselect. So I want this on over through here. Don't want this little piece here. And we have the tail. Looks like we have everything now, the way we want it. So I want to affect the background. But before I do that, I want to add a blank layer because I want to put the gradient on a new layer so that I'm not affecting just this image. But before I do that, I want it to go into the background. So I will take this, I have the bird selected. If I go up and select inverse, I now have the background selected. Get a new layer, come over to the bottom of the palette, and I'll get something light. And for the other color, something black. And I may need to switch these around, but let's see what we have. And get the gradient tool. And now the layer that I have selected is the blank background layer. And I'll put my cursor right in the middle near the base of the neck of the bird and go up on an angle. Up. Now that doesn't work because up in the top in the options bar, there are multiple ways you can have the background look. This is the first one, which is a gradient, one color up to the other. If I take the second one and do this, it has a highlight in the middle, which is pretty neat. I could expand this out and have that just highlighted. So it has a center section of the brighter color and an outside of the darker color. Let me turn off the dancing ants just to see what that looks like. And I go, oh, maybe I would like to have the lighter part even lighter. So I double click on that again, pick up a lighter color, come in and do that. Oh, not big enough. Just go out a little farther. Oh, I want a little more, go out a little farther. Well, that's pretty neat also. Or I go up to the top in the options bar and I can select the third way it may be. And look what that does. It creates things entirely different. So you can play with that. But the one I wanted for this one and the one we used for Neptune statue was the fourth one to the right. And I came in and took it on a diagonal. And that's how I achieved what you see here. I removed the dancing ants. There you have it. And suppose you say, oh, that's pretty neat, that's pretty neat, but let's do some colors. If I click on the foreground color and pick maybe this lighter color from the bird and use it with a dark color. Now let's do this. Remember, we are on, I want to be sure I am on layer 1, not the background layer, because if I'm on the background layer, it'll overlay my pixels for that. I just want to put this on this blank layer. And let's see what that looks like. Not as needed. It doesn't work as well for me. But maybe if we lighten that color even more and do it again. That works. And get rid of the dancing ants, select deselect. You can always add an adjustment and clip it. Let me do levels and clip it to just the background layer. So I clip that. So now when I change that, it will change only the background. If I want to move in and brighten things up this way, play with it in different ways, aspects, I can do that. If I want to darken the midtones, play with that. So now you have all kinds of options that you can do something to change the image of how it looks. Let's look at this from the beginning. That. And I emphasize a lot that the more you learn these techniques, the more they will be in your mind when you're shooting. So when I was shooting this image, I already had in mind that I would do the background the way we've done it here. I had that in my mind when I was shooting so that I could put a gradient tool and do maybe the black and white. I like the black and white, but I had that in mind. That's the key element, that the more that you learn to do things like this, you will start to think about that. And so your compositions, how much do you put in the image when you are shooting it, will be affected by what you already know you want to do. So I wanted a little extra space around the top. I wanted some extra space here. All this other stuff in the background made no difference to me whatsoever. But the depth of field was very critical, so that when I would have the final image, now we're dealing with small JPEGs here, but when I had the final image, that I wanted everything very sharp. And in this case, I see something now that I would change, and I'll do that in a minute. But when we come back to having all those layers and have everything the way you want it, what I'm seeing here is when you have a bird, the eye must be very sharp. Well, the eye is sharp, but it's not standing out very well. So I would get the dodge tool on highlights, bring it over, and just click it. You don't need to rub it around, just click it to bring up that highlight in the eye. Then go to the burn tool and put it on shadows. And what you are doing, and do the same thing, what you're doing is actually creating, so get it back. You're actually creating high contrast because I'm darkening only the darkest pixels by burning on shadows. And when I did the dodge tool, I was highlighting and brightening only the brightest pixels. So I actually are creating a contrast right in the eye. And I would do a little bit more of lightening up in this area here. Now remember, we're dealing with a small JPEG, so I don't have all the pixels that I would want to work with here. But you can see the difference of that eye, watch. So dodge with highlights and burn shadows, and just in that area is all you do it. That's a very striking image that way. So we've learned a lot. The next session, which will not be next week, it'll be the week after, will be on black and white. And I will run through Ansel's definition of fine art black and white. And I'll show you some examples of his techniques that he used in order to create a true tonal range of black and white. Is what happens in black and white when you get a color image. Now remember, he shot black and white film. We shoot in color and then we change it to black and white. Two shades of color, say a blue against a red, when they are converted to black and white, could just be the same tone, the same gray tone, and they merge together. So it's very important to understand what is juxtaposed to something else, and you're just changing something to black and white, taking a color image and changing it to black and white is not necessarily making it a good black and white. So we'll go through a number of those things. But I have homework for you. I sent you Yoda, and I separated him from the background. So it's a TIFF file, good old Yoda. You put him somewhere, you do something with him, put clouds in the background or put him in something, do multiple images with him, be creative with Yoda. Send me some images when you have them, send me the JPEGs so that I can see what you're doing. I can give you some suggestions along the way, but that's your homework. See how well you can put something together. Now, I'll take questions. Any questions, guys? You received this already. If you didn't get it, let me know and I'll send Yoda to you. Any questions?
This is Steve Riley. That was great. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm a complete newbie to Photoshop. I use Lightroom all the time. It's my understanding that Photoshop is essentially destructive. So you must work off a copy, right? Of that background layer should be a copy, not your original image.
Well, here's the thing, and I explained this once before. You weren't on our earlier lesson, so I understand. I don't do that. Photoshop is not destructive in and of itself. First of all, Lightroom does not have layers, so you cannot create composites as we just did today.
No, I know.
Okay, so then you get to the point where saying, okay, I want to do other things. Well, keep in mind, when you bring a raw file into Photoshop and you add other things to it, and when I'm doing dodge and burn, I am changing the pixels of the background layer or whatever layer. I'm actually changing those pixels. But when I save it, I'm saving it as a TIFF. It doesn't override the original raw copy. It doesn't.
That answers the question. So you're saving it as something else, so your original raw file still exists.
Absolutely, because you cannot save a raw file. You must save it as something else.
Okay, thank you.
But Steve, the reason I'm sort of on it more is a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Photoshop wasn't as powerful as it is now, and it really was a good thing to copy your background and then work on the background layer. Not the case today. But still somebody will say, well, John, you did dodge and burn. That actually changed the pixels. So if you want to come back in and change those, you can't do it. Well, yes, I can. I just get the dodge tool and overdo or redo some of the areas that I had done. And so I just never duplicate my layers, my background layer. I work straight from the image that I bring in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Steve, glad you joined us today. I hope you think about coming to the Guild as a guest and see what had happened when we start having meetings again.
I'll do that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Steve. Any other questions or anything, folks?
John, I have a question.
I'm not
Can you hear
answering
me?
yours.
Are you answering me, Mary, or no, you're
Yes,
gonna wait?
all right, I'll answer your question, Mary.
Okay, thanks. You had, when you were working on the Osprey, you said something about, move this because I don't need it, it'll go into a buffer. Am I
Yes,
correct with how, okay, where is the buffer?
it's just part of the software. It holds it for you. I don't know where they store it. It's somewhere on your hard drive, I would guess. But Photoshop has this little area that it saves the pixels for you when you copy.
Oh, okay.
It just saves it. The word to be used is called a buffer, just holding it until you do something with it, which is to paste it somewhere.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
John, doesn't that buffer hold just one image or one
Yes.
save? If you save
Yes.
something again, it writes it over.
Yes, it's a good point. You can't save something and then go to a different image and save and think both of them are saved. And it's only the last one that you've saved that's in that buffer.
Oh,
So you have to do them sequentially if you're going to do two different pieces. Do one, save it, move it to where you want it. But once you've put it into your image as a separate layer, it's there. So then go copy something else, bring it in, paste it. It will be in another layer. So you'll have different layers for each of the things you want.
John, do you work with
Makes
smart
sense.
objects?
Pardon?
Do you work with smart?
I have worked with smart objects, and here's the aspect about it. Primarily, I have not. Here's what a smart object is. If you have a smart object, it keeps track of the changes you've made, and you can change them again. It is really beneficial if you are doing filters, especially filters, because it then creates sort of sub-layers to the image, and you really can go back in and change those filters. And changing filters is changing how much, like on the spin of the prop, if I had put that in as a smart object, instead of me going back in history, starting over, back in history, starting over, I could have gone just to that layer that was then a smart object. It would have the radial zoom as a sub layer to it, and I could adjust that. So it's just a matter of what you get used to. But that's really the only time I find the value of doing the smart objects.
And this is Stephen. When does your history disappear? If you save,
History disappears when you save and you close out of Photoshop.
okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Hey, John, when you had a selection and you said you hit the backspace key to delete all the pixels that were in that selection, I assume
Yes.
you're using a PC. There is no backspace on a MacBook Pro. Does anybody know if the delete key does the same thing?
That may do it.
Yes,
Let
it
me-
does.
Yes.
Oh, it doesn't?
The
Okay,
delete key works on both the PC and the Mac.
I see.
Thanks.
Anything else? Otherwise, be safe. Have a great time. I'll see you in 2 weeks.